How's it going on? Welcome to this week's Q&A. Like any other week, if you want a chance of one of your questions being answered, make sure you do drop a comment down below, and I'll either answer it in that comment in a future video just like this one, or make a specific video if need be. If I haven't answered your question and it's been a couple weeks, make sure you do repost that question. Sometimes I do miss them, so I apologize for that, but I want to try to make sure I get to each and every question. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started with the first question of the week, and it is, what are my thoughts on wheel spacers? So a lot of people, they get wheel spacers to try and get that flushed look, which is okay. I'm not a fan of the slip-on wheel spacers because they don't a lot of times have a hub-centric setup, and the wheel doesn't naturally get centered properly, and could have some vibrations, could come loose and stuff like that. Also, if you do that option, you also eliminate the amount of threads that the lug nut is tightening onto. So something to consider. If it's just like a 3 to 5 mil, it'll probably be okay. But again, you could have some added vibration, so just keep in mind. Now, if it's the bolt-on ones, which is a much safer option, make sure that when you're putting those on either spacer, that your surface on the rotor is clean and you get the right wheel spacer so that it bolts onto your original hub correctly and onto your new wheel correctly. So they do come a lot of times with the center bore, so you may need to add a hub centric ring if you're using that, plus an aftermarket wheel. So just have to be careful and make sure you're getting exactly what you do need. Now, make sure you are torquing these, because a lot of times the nuts on them are actually shorter, so not a lot of threads on them. You don't want to over tighten them, then have a hard time removing them, and you don't want to leave them loose and then a wheel spacer and the wheel come off and fall off the car. So just keep that in mind. Follow the instructions, torque them properly, whatever vehicle you're using them on. After some time, about 50 to 100 miles, take the wheels back off and re-torque them. Make sure nothing came loose, and you should also get in the habit of torquing your wheels so you don't damage the lug nuts, or the threads on the studs or anything of that nature. Now, it's possible that you are putting some extra strain on the wheel bearings, because the wheel goes from here to an outside, so you're adding additional angle and load on that. So something to keep in mind. Now, my car does have aftermarket wheels with a different offset from stock, and a lot of times it'll be fine, but over a long period of time, it's possible that there could be some premature wheel bearing damage, but that's the name of the game. So if that's something you want to play with, that's fine. Whether you use OEM or aftermarket wheels, changing the offset can add to that premature wear. But again, we all do this for aesthetic reasons, and that's just part of the game. So again, it shouldn't be too much of an issue. I'm talking about 50, 60, 70, maybe 100,000 miles before it actually poses an issue. A lot of people go years and years and thousands of miles with no issues at all. So just something that could happen, and just something that you could foresee happening or happen to you. So I just want to make sure we have all the details here, but I'm okay with them. Use the right ones. The bolt-on ones are the best ones. If you're using the slip-on ones, then make sure you have the proper wheel studs. Get the extended wheel studs if need be, which is added labor. So the cheaper and safer option is just to get the hub on bolt-on ones, and you are good as far as that is. So hopefully that answers the question for you. All right, so the next question is affordable brakes, pads, and rotors for the Tlx Type S. If you own one of these cars, you know that the brakes are pretty bad on them. So a popular option is the Brakenetics front and rear pads and rotors. They go anywhere from $550 to $650. They have a couple of different options, which is a nice. I've installed a few set of these on a Tlx Type S, and everyone has had good feedback from them. So it's definitely an affordable option. Probably costs you just as much as the OEM pads and rotors. Obviously, if you want something more high end and stuff like that, you can get the racing brake stuff like I have, but it's almost triple the price. There's also function works, there's gyro disc, so there's a couple options, but the most affordable and most popular, they look great, is definitely the Brakenetic stuff. I'll have at least one link to them in the description section down below, and you could search for them on eBay or on Google and find yourself what you want. Very nice looking rotors. They seem to be great, and a lot of popular and use for them, and great feedback. So hopefully that answers the question for you. All right, so the next question is, am I seeing carbon buildup on Honda's 2.0T? So to be honest with you, it's not one of those engines that we are constantly taking apart, if ever. I've seen a total of 3 blown head gaskets come across the dealer, usually on the higher side, so 80,000 plus. And, again, it's not something that we're constantly taking apart. So no news is good news. So I don't have a solid answer for you, although it is direct injections, meaning the injector is inside the chamber and not on the runner. So there is nothing washing that valve and keeping that carbon from building up. Now, from doing injectors on the L15 and on the Earth Dreams J series, on the 16 to 18 pilots or so, and some of the Odysseys of Ridgevines and stuff like that, we see some buildup, sometimes not. So it's a hit or a miss. Use good fuel, change your oil. If you want, you could add a catch can, although sometimes, and in most cases, when people add catch cans, especially on a boosted application like the 2.0T is, they do tend to leak. So just something to keep in mind. And by adding a catch can, although you mean good by it, you could be causing additional post-MAF airflow sensor leaks. So just something to keep in mind. Again, good maintenance, good quality fuel goes a long way. And that's what I would focus my, intentions on. And drive the car, drive it the way you want it. Just do your maintenance. Be honest with yourself. If you abuse it, you got to be more aggressive with maintenance and anything of that nature. Just, if you drive it lightly, you'll probably be okay. Either way, do the maintenance accordingly. But as far as the carbon buildup goes, again, no news is good news. There's no bulletins or anything like that for the 2.0T, which is a great sign. I just want to make a note also that it is a smaller sample size. Obviously, there are a ton more 1.5Ts versus a 2.0T. And somebody with a 2.0T is usually more, maintenance and performance orientated. So they will, use the better fuel. They'll also use, more vigorous maintenance strategies and stuff like that. So I feel like the clientele does have a different mindset, thus, limiting carbon buildup and other issues with the platform. So hopefully that answers the question for you. All right, so the next question is blower motor noise. Is it common? Does it happen often? And blower motor failures is not too common on Hondas and Acuras. Yes, absolutely, it can happen. Typically, when we see a noise coming from the blower motor, so when you have the heat or the AC on and you're hearing some sort of a strange noise, a whine, a flutter, or anything of that nature, that usually happens if the cabin filter has not been changed in a while and there's a lot of debris piled up. It's possible something fell into the blower motor fan causing a noise. Or even more often when you actually do change a cabin filter and some of that debris actually falls in there. So yes, in that situation, it does happen. What you want to do is remove your cabin filter, take a flashlight and take a mirror in there and see if you could see anything, or take out the cabin filter, take out the lid, of course, and turn on the blower motor, and that debris may come out. So obviously, if it's running, do not stick your hand in there. So make sure your blower motor is off before you go poking around in there. But that's usually the situations where we do see it happening. At times, the bearing may fail, but it's very rare for it to happen. So usually there's either a lot of debris in the cabin filter and it falls in there, or as you're servicing and changing the cabin filter, it falls in there. So pine needles, leaves, anything of that nature. Sometimes even some small mice do get in there. We've seen it time and time again. But again, not something that we see on an often basis, especially if you're changing your filter routinely. I do mine every 6 to 1 year, so 6 months to 12 months. I like to do mine on the 6 months type of early end. You can do whatever you want. If you're a smoker, I would suggest doing it obviously on the earlier side. If not, then it is what it is. Use your judgment. Just make sure that you are changing them. Keep in mind that if you have something with a AC or heated back, then if you have like a Pilot or an Odyssey or something like that, then you have 2 blower motors. Typically it's on the front blower motor, but it's possible that some debris could get in the back. but I very rarely see that. We also sometimes see them fail, which they don't turn on at all. But in most cases, if it's making noises, it's probably some sort of debris, and you could go ahead and clean that and you should be okay. There's probably no reason to pay a dealer technician to take it out for you and clean it. You can in most cases clean it yourself. So hopefully that answers the question for you. All right, so last but not least, question of the week, and it is, how do I pinpoint a whine or a noise from the engine itself? So first thing you want to do, or first thing I do, is try to listen for it. And if it is confirmed that is from like a drive belt component or somewhere in the time belt area, at that point, first thing I will do, if it has power steering, is turn the steering wheel. If it doesn't have hydraulic power steering, then you could eliminate this process. If you hear a whine while turning the steering wheel, then most cases it's a leak and it's low on fluid, or the pump itself is bad. It could also be a steering rack or a blockage of some sort. Now, if the car doesn't have a power steering, once again, you can skip that step. And newer cars, most of them don't have hydraulic power steering systems anymore. So that is something good. Now, next thing I like to do is cycle the AC on and off. And if you hear a pitch change, chances are it's the compressor bearing that is failing. So the clutch bearing, not the compressor itself. Now, if the noise only happens with the AC on, chances are that it's the bearing inside the compressor itself, one of them, that is failing. So if noise happens there, whether or not the compressor is on, but it's changing a pitch, then chances are that is the clutch bearing, once again, that is failing. So that's something I like to test. If none of that is happening, next thing I do is remove the serpentine belt. If the noise goes away, you know that it's something with one of those accessory pulleys. If the noise is still there, then it's something most likely inside the transmission. Usually be a tapping, not so much of a whining, but sometimes weird things do happen. So if you remove the belt and the noise stopped, next thing I would do is spin the pulleys one by one. Sometimes you could tell, sometimes you can't. Noises do play tricks on you. If you can't tell, I would put the belt back on and try to take a stethoscope or a long screwdriver, and be very careful where you stick it, especially when the engine is running, because obviously if it gets caught, it's not going to be pretty for anyone. So do proceed with caution, and just try to hear where you hear that noise with the stethoscope, and try to pinpoint it that way. A lot of times you can feel something rough. So there's many ways to kind of pinpoint these noises. Sometimes it's very obvious, sometimes it is not. And once again, noises do play tricks on you. Also, we do see a lot of times transmissions whining. So if it's from the back side of the engine, chances are it's inside the transmission and not from the accessory pulleys or time belt or anything of that nature. So hopefully that answers the question for you, and I'll catch everyone on the next one.